The soft spring sunlight embraced with tenderness the quiet residential street lined with white mansions in Greenwich, Connecticut. 30 years had passed since the days when the warm aroma of Grandma's kitchen filled the air. "Let me confirm once again," said the real estate agent. "The reservation deposit is $800,000, correct?" Elizabeth Williams nodded slightly with a dignified posture that belied her 32 years. Her refined profile was visible beneath her shade jacket, exuding the confidence earned through 10 years of training. "Yes," she replied, "200,000 is my funds, and the bank has approved the remaining loan." Elizabeth had entered a prestigious culinary school at 18 and later gained experience at the Michelin 3-star restaurant El Bernardine in New York. She felt her heart race as the moment had finally come to transform her accomplishments into her restaurant. Fascinated by her grandmother's cooking since childhood, she had clung to the dream of reviving those flavors in the modern era. After 10 years of working through holidays and working overtime, she had finally made it here. "I believe I can show you a wonderful property in Greenwich Avenue," continued the agent. At that moment, her phone rang. "Excuse me," Elizabeth said, answering the phone. "Elizabeth, Vanessa is engaged to Michael Harrington." The excited voice of her mother, Patricia, echoed. Patricia, always concerned about neighborhood opinions, looked perfect with her hair, makeup, and clothing, always at the center of the local gardening club. She constantly strove to join the upper class. "Harrington Constructions." "Yes, that important construction company. We're going to have a celebration tonight, and you must come without fail. We've rented the Belhaven Club." Elizabeth let out a small sigh. Her sister Vanessa, with her model-like appearance and designer clothes, had grown up receiving her parents' total adoration. Working at a luxury jewelry store, she was desperate to secure a ticket to high society. From childhood, their parents had pampered Vanessa while dismissing Elizabeth's dream with comments like, "Open a store." "But I have a property visit today." "You can open a store anytime," her mother responded. "This is an important family day, or are you saying you can't celebrate Vanessa's happiness as always?" Her mother's words hid the contempt for Elizabeth, who was just a chef. Elizabeth lowered her gaze. The recipe notebook, inherited from her grandmother, felt heavy in her bag. That night, a party was being held at the Williams under the chandelier. Guests chatted elegantly, and "think about appearances" was her father Robert's constant phrase. As the owner of a medium-sized local construction company, he always cared about public opinion, wearing expensive suits over his robust figure. Although his company was never large, he had maintained his reputation in the city. "Oh, Elizabeth, still in that chef's uniform. You should dress better. Don't come to the wedding at Albury House dressed like that," said Vanessa's voice, dripping with disdain. Her engagement ring sparkled prominently by her side, and the Harrington family members smiled graciously. Elizabeth smiled silently. The $200,000 she had saved over 10 years, deposited in a joint account with her parents, came from her hospitalization after a car accident years ago. At the time, it seemed prudent, just in case. Although she now regretted it, she had trusted her family and never felt the need to change it. Outside the window, the spring night wind blew softly, as if foretelling what was to come. In her apartment in suburban New York, Elizabeth turned on the lights, dragging her tired feet. The collar of her chef jacket had traces of sweat from the long hours of preparation. Outside the window, rain had started falling quietly. Finally finished for today, she murmured, the fatigue of 12 hours on her feet overwhelming her. Still, she turned on her computer, a daily habit, checking her savings balance, and the countdown to her opening was her small joy. She had a meeting with the interior contractor scheduled for tomorrow. The feeling that her dream was finally approaching reality calmed her tired body. The screen lit up brightly. The WWS Farg online banking screen logged in to check her account balance. Elizabeth's eyes opened wide. "Balance, 0. Some mistake," she whispered. Her trembling fingers opened the transaction history. Cold numbers lined up. One transaction from just an hour ago, a transfer to Vanessa Williams, $200,000. Her eyes stayed fixed on the fact, seemingly unreal. Her hand reached for her phone, but the call wouldn't connect. The number for her father was the same. Her heart began to pound. Sweat ran down her back. The photograph of her grandmother, hung on the kitchen wall, seemed to smile sadly. Then came a message from Vanessa, "Come to the family house now." She drove through the rain, the sound of the windshield wipers clearing the drops marking an ominous rhythm. 30 minutes later, she arrived at the Williams mansion. An unfamiliar Bentley was parked at the entrance, surely the Harrington family's car. The mansion was shrouded in an unusual silence. Beneath the expensive chandelier, only the ticking of the clock marked 9 p.m. There were 4 shadows in the living room. Vanessa, gracefully seated on the sofa, dressed in what seemed like a new dress, her large diamond engagement ring shining. Father Robert, with his upright posture, was unusually still in his suit, even at home. Mother Patricia, wrapped in an expensive dress, her hair and makeup perfect, seemed rather artificial. And Elizabeth, standing motionless in her chef's jacket, the smell of sweat and kitchen creating an out-of-place atmosphere in the luxurious reception room. "What happened to all my savings?" Elizabeth's voice was surprisingly calm. "We used it for Vanessa's wedding," said her father with an authoritative tone, the expression of someone who had just closed a big deal. "Since we are also account holders, there's no legal problem. A wedding costs at least $500,000. Her mother chuckled softly, holding a brochure for a luxury wedding venue. "An event like Vanessa's wedding takes priority. Your restaurant can wait." Elizabeth couldn't believe what she was hearing. 10 years of effort, overtime, working through holidays, countless tests to recreate her grandmother's recipes perfectly, all vanished in an instant. "But that was my money." Vanessa laughed out loud, her voice carrying the arrogance that had been instilled in her since childhood. "Anyway, no one is going to eat at such a cheap restaurant." Her parents smiled at this expression. Elizabeth stood frozen, her eyes cold as if looking at strangers. It seemed impossible they were blood relatives. "The wedding will be at Albury House," her mother said, her eyes gleaming with ecstasy, as though witnessing the realization of a long-cherished dream. "The Harrington family also thinks it's wonderful. With this marriage, we'll finally be part of true high society. No one wants to eat your food. This money is better spent on my wedding." Vanessa's voice echoed. No one would eat at a restaurant like that. Her parents' laughter overlapped. Those voices squeezed Elizabeth's heart like demonic whispers. Elizabeth stood up slowly. A calm, unprecedented filled her heart. The tremor in her body mysteriously subsided. "That's right, your restaurant would fail anyway." Vanessa's loud laughter echoed through the mansion. Elizabeth didn't say anything. Gripping her grandmother's inherited recipe book tightly, she walked silently toward the exit. Behind her, the laughter of her family still echoed. The pop of a champagne cork signaled the start of a festive celebration. She started the car, and the mansion's lights grew smaller in her rearview mirror. Inside the car, the tears finally began to flow, her hands shaking as they gripped the steering wheel. "I'll show them," she whispered. In the spring night sky, the full moon shone coldly, its light silently watching over Elizabeth's new resolution. Under the summer sun that beat down on the kitchen of El Bernardine, Elizabeth was preparing sauces in silence. 3 months had passed since that night. Her expression now had a sharp light that wasn't there before. "Elizabeth, do you have a moment?" The voice came from executive chef Mark Anderson. Though he was around 60, his posture was as straight as bamboo, and his eyes were sharper than those of young chefs. He had reigned in a 3-star kitchen for over 30 years. "Yes, chef. 2 hours until service starts." Elizabeth stopped her work and followed Mark through the bustle of the kitchen. They headed to the quietest place in the restaurant, the wine cellar. As they entered the temperature-controlled space, the mature, rich aroma tickled their nostrils. "You've changed recently," Mark said, looking directly at Elizabeth. The man who had discovered her at 18 and made her a first-class chef understood her like a daughter. "I'm sorry if it's affecting my work." "No, quite the opposite," Mark continued. "Our cooking has gained more depth. It has a flavor that only comes from someone who has endured hardships." "I know what happened that night." Elizabeth's eyes wavered. Mark slowly took a bottle of wine and continued, Chateau Rill of 19, born in the chaos of the post-war era. Yet it captivated the world with its extraordinary quality. Sometimes the harshest environments produce the finest art. As he silently wove his words, Mark poured the wine into a jug. The deep ruby liquid reflected a soft light. I have several contacts who are investors. I'm sure they'll be captivated by your cooking. Would you like to hold a tasting? At those words, Elizabeth's heart raced. It was as if a beam of light had pierced the end of a long tunnel. The next 2 weeks transformed Elizabeth's life. During the day, she stood in the kitchen as usual, and at night, she immersed herself in developing her dream. Test dishes in her home kitchen, modernized the recipes inherited from her grandmother, pouring her soul into each plate. Countless sleepless nights passed with no time to feel fatigue. Her heart was filled with a kind of euphoria. Even her anger toward her family had been sublimated into a driving force for creation. Then came the fateful day. On the top floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan, 5 investors gathered in a place with views of the New York skyline. They were all owners of Michelin-starred restaurants and the top experts in the industry. Elizabeth prepared a 7-course meal. The appetizer was her grandmother's traditional clam chowder, reconstructed with a modern twist, covered with caviar and edible flowers. A creamy soup flowed when the spoon entered. The investors' eyes sparkled at the contrast between the elegant appearance and the nostalgic taste. The main course was beef stew, slow-cooked for 48 hours, a memorable dish her grandmother used to prepare for Sunday dinners, elevated with the latest cooking techniques. The meat had a silk-like texture, eaten with an unexpected touch of wasabi. This is James Morrison, who had led the restaurant industry for many years, spoke. His expression showed an emotion never before seen. I've been in this industry for over 40 years, but I've never been moved by a cuisine like this. By the time they finished all the dishes, including dessert, the sky had turned twilight. Elizabeth Morrison stood up and quietly announced, "We want to invest in your restaurant. The amount is $500,000. However, Elizabeth held her breath. Never compromise your passion and talent, and please, write a new page in New York's culinary history. Outside the window, the lights of the streets of Manhattan began to light up at once, as if celebrating the beginning of Elizabeth's new life. The contract was immediately signed. She secured a prime location in Greenwich Village through Morrison's connections. Interior design, staff hiring, menu development. Everything proceeded surprisingly well. 2 weeks before the opening, Elizabeth stood in the kitchen of her new restaurant. The shiny new kitchen team reflected the light softly. The cold touch of the stainless steel countertop felt pleasant under her hands. "Congratulations, Elizabeth." Mark visited her and put a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you, chef. I couldn't have come this far without you." Mark shook his head. "All of this is your own strength." He paused briefly, as if choosing his words. "Sometimes, the people closest to us give us our greatest tests, but only those who overcome them gain true strength. You've proven that." Elizabeth nodded silently. Outside the window, the twilight sky burned brightly. Then came the opening day. Reservations had been booked 3 months in advance, just through word of mouth on social media. Even the food critic from the New York Times had made a reservation. 30 minutes before the opening, Elizabeth donned her new uniform, her custom chef jacket. She looked dignified and beautiful, as if representing her newfound pride. "Everyone, listen," Elizabeth spoke softly, but powerfully, to the gathered staff. "Starting today, we begin creating a new story. Let's put our souls into each dish." Expectation and tension filled the kitchen, and at the moment of welcoming their first guest, Elizabeth's eyes had a light of strong will. At the Albury House, in the luxury residential area of Greenwich, Vanessa was busy with her wedding dress fitting. The pure white silk organza dress was specially ordered from Paris. Delicate artisan embroidery adorned the hems. "Miss, could you turn a little to the right?" asked the voice of the Parisian dress designer. Vanessa smiled with satisfaction. Around her, high-class friends gathered, raising voices of admiration for her appearance. It was truly the brightest moment of her life. At that moment, a friend grabbed her new iPhone and exclaimed excitedly, "Look, this is a review from the New York Times. A new culinary sanctuary born in Greenwich Village. Elizabeth Williams' restaurant, War, has captured everyone's hearts." Just 2 weeks after opening, the air froze. The article continued, "Chef Elizabeth has reinterpreted the recipes inherited from her grandmother with stunning talent, bringing a fresh air to the culinary world. Reservations are already fully booked 6 months in advance, and rumors suggest Michelin inspectors have secretly visited." A friend timidly asked, "Your sister?" Vanessa's face drained of color. That evening, at a dinner at the Bellhaven Club, the most influential social venue in Connecticut, the rumors quickly spread. "Did you hear that Harrington's fiancé's sister is getting amazing reviews?" Drinking wine, high society members whispered about this scandalous truth. Her savings were used for the wedding expenses. How terrible. The rumor had reached the ears of Victoria, Michael Harrington III's mother. In the mansion study, Victoria faced Robert Harrington. A heavy atmosphere hung in the room. "Is this story true?" Victoria's voice was cold as ice. "Answer me." Patricia, who had been invited, replied, "That's a family matter." Victoria stood. Her bearing carried the dignity of the 200-year history of the Harrington family. The Harrington family is one of the most important dynasties in the country's construction industry. Our reputation is irreplaceable. And tarnishing that reputation. Her voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Meanwhile, at Williams Construction, the impact had already begun to show. "Robert will have to step down from this project after all," announced a courteous but firm executive from a major developer. Cancellations of new project contracts were happening one after another. "But our track record, the credibility of your company, is being questioned." At those words, Robert's backbone froze. He could almost hear the sound of the credit he had built over 30 years crumbling. A week later, an email arrived from the manager of Lansbury House. "We deeply regret to inform you that, regarding the reservation for your wedding venue, we would like to reconsider." Vanessa screamed when she read those lines. An expensive facade fell to the ground and shattered. This can't be true. It can't be. The pure white dress ordered from Paris still lay wrapped in vinyl, shining coldly in the corner of the room. The next day, an official notice arrived from the Harrington family lawyer regarding the dissolution of the engagement between Michael Harrington III and Miss Vanessa Williams. Behind the objective text, a cold determination leaked out. Vanessa's mother, Patricia, fainted as she read the notice, collapsing onto the expensive sofa. Robert, her father, stared out the window. The price of the company's stock had plummeted. Contract cancellations from business partners were flooding in, and resignation letters from employees were piling up. "Why?" Vanessa broke into tears. "It's our fault. It's all Elizabeth's fault. Everything is her fault." As the sound of heavy rain hitting the windows echoed, the downfall of the Williams family proceeded silently but surely. The family made one last attempt for hope, visiting Elizabeth's restaurant. "We sincerely apologize," they said. "We are fully booked for the next 6 months." The dignified voice of the hostess contained none of its previous arrogance. At that moment, a black Rolls-Royce stopped in front of the restaurant. Through the window, Elizabeth could be seen. Her new chef jacket shone like a symbol of victory. She didn't even spare a glance at her family. Standing on the street, the luxury car drove away silently, leaving only the stunned figures of her family behind. Spring 2029. New York's morning began with its usual bustle. Men Restaurant stood quietly in a corner of Greenwich Village. Even after winning 2 Michelin stars, reservations remained fully booked a year in advance. A line had already started to form in front of the store early in the morning. In the kitchen, Elizabeth was working on new menu developments. Now, at 39 years old, her expression conveyed satisfaction and composure. No trace of the pain from 5 years ago remained. "Chef, the food and wine interviewer has arrived," announced a young staff member. This month's article focused on the top female chefs in the United States. Elizabeth was going to be featured as the main subject. "Thank you, I'll be there in 10 minutes." Elizabeth carefully finished her work while gazing out the window. The spring sunlight gently illuminated the new buds on the street trees. Meanwhile, in the Connecticut suburbs, in an old apartment about 30 minutes by car from the former luxury residential area, Patricia arrived late. The voice of her father, Robert, resonated in the small room. Since losing his company at 62, he had been working as a security guard at a local shopping center. His expensive suits had been replaced by work uniforms, and his once dignified expression was covered with fatigue. A moment. Patricia, the mother, worked part-time at the cosmetics counter in a department store. Her once perfect hair and makeup were now done by herself, and her former elegance had faded. Reading that article again, Robert looked at his wife's tablet. The screen displayed an article about Elizabeth. "She's become something extraordinary." Patricia's voice had a complex resonance, mixing regret and pride. At that moment, Vanessa was processing the customer's purchases at the supermarket checkout. After leaving the luxury jewelry store, her day of luxury had ended. Working here, her brand-name uniform had been replaced by a supermarket apron. "Oh my God, isn't that Vanessa?" The voice came from an old social acquaintance, wrapped in luxury brands with perfect makeup. It reminded Vanessa of her former self. "I finally got a reservation at Menu. I waited a year. It's your sister's restaurant." After all, Vanessa continued scanning items in silence. That night, a letter arrived at Elizabeth's office, written in her mother's elegant handwriting. The envelope read, "To my dear daughter." Outside the window, the nighttime view of Manhattan shone. Elizabeth slowly opened the letter. "Dear daughter, it's been so long since we saw each other every day. When I see your success in the newspapers and the media, my heart fills with emotion. How foolish I was to belittle my daughter working in a restaurant. Now you are a world-renowned chef and, above all, a proud woman who lives true to her beliefs, without compromise. I won't ask for forgiveness, I just wanted to send you this. Mother is proud of you. With love, Mother." Elizabeth quietly closed the letter and put it in the shredder. The finely shredded paper fell like snow. "A guest has arrived," announced the hostess. Elizabeth stood up and adjusted her new chef jacket. "Tonight's guests are the governor of New York State and his group." She smiled. "My family is this restaurant and our guests. That's enough for me now." The spring night's wind gently hit the window, as if announcing the arrival of a new season.